Let there be light, and there was light. Okay, I just feel the need to just consolidate the information on Job. Okay, that's if you're joining us for the first time on Job. There are three. This perhaps is the fourth presentation on Job. Of course, Job in the Bible, the Holy Bible. Okay, so it is with the idea or understanding that Job needed to have a Kundalini activation. It was the process of really activating the third eye. And we see that in the 42nd chapter of Job, where he speaks about he answers God and say, of course, that I know that you can't do anything. Now, the word can't means cannot do everything. I was very surprised to hear that because we have always had this notion that God can do everything. And there, I think we could say that with those words, it's like Job is really saying that we are God's hands and feet and eyes and so on. Well, so because again, this coincides with the scripture verse in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God. So everything comes through word and thought form. But we are like instrumental in the manifestation of things. So basically, if you, for instance, wanted you prayed for the manifestation of a beautiful house, there would need to be people building the house that you would be occupying, of course, or whatever it is. So we are actual instruments there in the doing. So the word do, of course, which is another word that equals 10, and that is yes, 10, and that also equals perfect. So we are an extension of God in this sense. And it's amazing that, of course, with Job being having this self-righteous notion, I would say, or he had this air about him, and I won't quite say arrogant at all. He just seemed, I get the picture that Job really was a man who just did things by the book. So his relationship with God was not really as God would have wanted to be. Now, what I really want to wrap up in this presentation is that the story of Job, as I say, if you're new to it, is really that of a rich man, a man who was wealthy, and a man who had 10 children, 7 sons, 3 daughters, and basically he lost everything catastrophically in fire and death, and lots of things were happening. And of course, you can imagine with a man of such stature, that would have had an effect on him, so much so that he also had boils on his skin. But all of that happened through an agreement that God had with Satan, that Satan had the idea that if God were to take all those things and wealth and everything away from Job, Job would turn his back on God. But God said, well, I don't think this is going to happen, but the only thing I can tell you is that I want you to spare his life. Basically, so that's where Satan went to work on Job, and Job had, of course, come very close to it's the wording is said that he didn't curse God, he didn't and that was really basically in the first chapter as well. But reading on, we could see that Job really cursed the day he was born. Now, to curse the day you was born is very, very crucial to me in my understanding. And it's no wonder that when it came to really God had this long dialogue with Job, and he's saying, I want you to think of where you come from. Basically, I want you to think of who it is that formed the earth. I want you to think about how do you think that the earth came into being. I want you to think of those things, and where were you then? And so basically, it's like knowing that everything came from the woman, everything came from the womb. That's what God wanted Job to understand. Everything came from that, from the womb. And very much so, because Job had gone so far as when his wife had told him, why don't you curse God and die? And he turned to his wife and says, you're talking like the common women on the street. So that, of course, was very indicative of Job's sense of there we could say sense of arrogance. Yes, yeah, because he saw those women as common on the street, and of course, I think that God really wanted Job to understand all wombs. Once it is a womb, a woman, you need to have a degree of respect for a woman. And that is why I hope people who are watching this video really get this. And because it's a story that has so much to it, and of course I need to unpack this and numerically as well. But what it is that when Job's wife ordered or advised Job, we say advise, it was a question. Why don't you, or a suggestion, why don't you curse God and die? This is the thing, the word die as well. It's like know thyself. Okay, let's not go too much into that. But we see from the whole story of 42 chapters that his wife was spoken of once. This is where she came into the picture. And there was no mention of a name. There were names for all his friends. There were names for the young man who spoke up. There were his daughters and his sons. There were no name mentioned for the wife. And it's just spoken like just the once. Okay, now something so, as I said before, something so profound, to say something so serious like cursing God, you would really think that there would be some great punishment or something, or some kind of reflective comment towards that, but there was no mention, because what I would like people to understand is that Job's wife in there was really the serpent, was really Mother Eve, was really one and the same. God was really, so Job's wife, for instance, was really God in this sense. Really God in this sense. So, and that is why she was aiding Job, like in the let us, number 8, because 8 is God, let us make man in our image after our likeness. We see the word us as well equals 31, of course, which equals like daughters as well. So this is the feminine there. So we also see in the story of Job that the young men died, but the daughters, which is supposed to be feminine, the feminine or the divine feminine there was no more mention of that there. But it is really that saying that it is the life force, that's the life force. So Job